So let's move on to the next part of the program, and that is New Enterprise Forum, Past, Present, and Future. So we finally come to utilize our speakers here. We are behind in time, yes, I know. Yes. So Francis promised to do the introductions of our first speaker, so here you go.
Thank you. You're welcome. It's a great honor to present our founder, Tom. I looked a little bit at his background to do this, and I hope you'll agree with me that his career was well constructed and took several tangents over the years, but really based on what he learned in the past before that. So I met him in 1983. I was myself I was part of a startup, a co-founder of my first tech startup in Ann Arbor. And at that time, I was very aware of what's going on in Ann Arbor, very small ecosystem, obviously. And Tom's name came popping up all the time. He was doing turnarounds. He was picking companies that were not doing well, startup for the most part. And he was getting in there and being interim management, sweat equity, and he did that over with his partner, Aiden Harris. And he did that for 4 or 5 years. And again, his name was always, this guy's really turning around these companies. And then towards 1987, he took advantage of the first state of Michigan matching fund to create venture funds in Michigan. And he created EDF Venture. And EDF Venture was a very major investor in the community, leading many investment, but the whole recipe was coming back too. Tom would find companies to start. He started 5 companies when he was running EDF Venture directly as a founder. He founded technology and the technical founder in the university, joined with him, funded the company, run it for a while, fund the management. And there's been many great success. Company like HandyLab, Interlace, company that have gone public, IPOs, and great many exits. He raised free fund, 120 million for over 17 years. He returned 1.4 billion to his investor after that time. And so he was done with venture capital, but not quite, because he had been teaching at the university for quite some time, the business students. And then he started, going to university, being an executive in residence at Zellery Institute. And not only was he teaching, mentoring students, he created the first venture fund there, the Frankel Funds, to allow students to directly participate in funding startups. And that was huge, right? After 7 years of that, he took another little tangent. He had been funding his family foundation with all his great success, and he had been working on the foundation side to really promote what I'm going to call action-based philanthropy. In other words, telling these nonprofits how they can focus on specific targets and get things done. And so at that time, it took that family fund to great success in creating more and more nonprofit to tackle climate change and other environmental problems at the Great Lakes level, at the local level, and at the university level. It's my privilege to introduce Tom. Thank you.
Wow, that's very nice, Francis. You took all of my time, so I'll just say thank you and look forward to the next speaker. Well, it is a real pleasure to be here and also to congratulate all of you on. This is working, right? Yes. Okay. Congratulate all of you on a great achievement. which I'll come back to. But uh, many of you know it's not too hard to start something, but it is really hard to sustain things. And to sustain something for 40 years is really special. So more on that a little bit later. Just as an old habit and to understand who the audience is, I'm curious to know how many of you are investors and how many of you are startup companies? So how many, raise your hand if you're an investor. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And how many of you are entrepreneur startup people? Great. So I asked that because in the early days, it was really hard to find an investor to get to that meeting. We worked really hard. We had a lot of people who wanted to be investors. We had a lot of people who wanted to sell services, but it was really hard to find investors. And so that alone is one reason why this group is here for 40 years, is you actually have the two components that are really necessary to make this work. So a few things on, I was asked to say a few words on the history of NEF. Now, how do you say a few words about a 40-year organization? We'll try. So, it began, I think, as you know, 40 years ago was 1986. So what was it like in Ann Arbor in 1986? Well, it was like Michigan had been for a long time. It was a car state. It was a car culture. Entrepreneurship was a really big deal in Michigan, but in a way that was very different from the way that we operate today. You could start a tool and die shop pretty quickly. You could start anything related to the automotive companies pretty quickly, and they didn't seem to need any help with that. But if we wanted to start a medical device company or a software company or something else, that was hard because there wasn't really an ecosystem here for that. And in fact, we used to refer to this as a third world country when it came to venture capital and ecosystems. So it was hard. On the other hand, there was some real hope because the governor at the time, Governor Blanchard, wanted to diversify the economy, and he encouraged the administration to figure out some ways to get that done. The Michigan Pension Fund, and this might not be exactly right, but if they did invest in venture capital before 1980, it was a pretty good secret. But in 1981, they really made an effort to invest in venture capital. So that was interesting. Professor Brophy at the business school started the Growth Capital Symposium. And many of you have, I'm sure, been to that. But that started in around 1980, 1981. So there were signs of hope. Then some technology emerged from Ann Arbor, from a nonprofit research firm here, Environmental Research Institute, which didn't relate to the environmental research that I'm familiar with. It had to do with the skies and shooting down rockets and things like that, I think. But they came up with the technology for machine vision. And 3 companies, and maybe 4, started in the 80s and got venture capital from outside of the state of Michigan because there was hardly any venture capital in the state of Michigan. And that was pretty exciting. And so people began to think, we could do this here. We could be like California and Silicon Valley. And and there was a great desire to make that happen. And we didn't think we could be Silicon Valley, but we thought maybe we could be a Silicon Valley for factory automation, say. We might be Automation Alley, which part of the state was called for a while. So that was the time. And so at the time, I see Mike Stabler came back. So Mike Stabler plays a role in this because he was at the state, he was on the board of an organization at the state that was charged with finding solutions to this problem of lack of entrepreneurship. And so he came up with a program for seed funds. Some people thought we might be candidates for that, so they talked to us about it. And it didn't really work for us at the time, and we couldn't figure out how to make it work for us. But Mike talked to us about how it might work. And they tweaked the program, and so we decided that my partner and I that we would be venture capitalists if the state would allow us to. And to do that, though, we wrote a business plan like all good entrepreneurs. You got to figure out, can we really do this? And if we could raise the money, could we really make money in venture capital in Michigan in the 1980s? That was a tall task. And so, in putting that business plan together, we realized that if we were to be successful, we were going to have to help build the ecosystem for entrepreneurs because there had to be a pipeline of people to start companies because not every company idea is going to be fundable. And we needed to have some other source of investment to help these companies. So we talked to everybody we knew that was entrepreneurial. It didn't take very long. A lot of former Ford executives thought they were entrepreneurs, but so we talked to everybody we knew, and we threw out this idea of, wouldn't it make sense to have a group, have a place where people could go and entrepreneurs could meet investors, investors could meet entrepreneurs. We could all learn together what it took to be successful, and we could start building a pipeline so that if we were venture capitalists, we'd have somebody to invest in. And that's how New Enterprise Forum started. After talking to everybody we knew about it, and they all said, great, we invited 19 of the most prominent people in this part of the country, really Ann Arbor, but I think a couple were from a little beyond it. But we invited the most prominent business-like people we could find to a meeting. We asked them to be the board of the New Enterprise Forum. They all said yes, and away we went. And we had a meeting at, I think it was then the Hilton out at Briarwood, and people showed up. I mean, one reason for inviting 19 people to be on the board is so we'd have at least 20 people at the first meeting. But as it turned out, there were like 80 or something like that. And in those days, there were newspapers. We had newspapers for news. And the newspaper had pictures and there were headlines. And we thought, wow, so, this has legs. And so that's how this organization began. And Mike is here, by the way, and he was one of our first board members. And we're grateful for that. And if anybody else was on that board that I don't recognize, I apologize, but raise your hand. I know Ian Bund was here earlier, but he had to leave. So that's really how it came about. And one kind of anecdote that may not be in the history, I'm sure whoever mentioned all those newsletters, maybe it was in there, but one thing that was kind of fun about the early days was Ann Arbor had this community TV, whatever, I don't know, channel, whatever. And so they were starved for content. Well, we had content. And so the beauty of it was they would come to these meetings and film us. And because they didn't have content, they would run that at all hours of the day and night for a month until the next meeting. And so everybody knew what we were doing because no matter what your working schedule was, or even if you never watched the Ann Arbor channel, you channel surf. Sometime you would flip by it to get to another channel and they'd see the New Enterprise Forum. So that was a really fun part of the beginnings. And so I think that I probably left a lot out, but I think that's the most important thing, except for the fact that it's here 40 years later, which is phenomenal. And I think one of the reasons, so Gary mentioned that there were others, and then why didn't they make it? Well, I think one of the things that we learn about sustaining an organization is that it has to change with the times. If I were still president, we wouldn't be around anymore, I could tell you. But to change is difficult because you get into habits and it's hard. It's hard to get people to change. But if you don't change, you become obsolete, and the times have changed. Now, it may look like it hasn't really changed very much. We always had companies presenting like you did very well. But there have been changes. One of the changes, for example, that I noticed when I looked at the website and saw the mission statement today versus the mission statement when we started, is that emphasis that you talked about training, coaching, requiring that those presentations be good. And we wanted to do that in a way, but I mean, for us, it was just getting somebody up on the stage to talk was quite an achievement. And to the extent we could influence them at all, that was an achievement. But to have the kind of energy that you guys have put to this, you've really taken it to another level and found the thing that needed to be tweaked and to evolve, and you made it happen. And that's why we're celebrating this 40 years later. So thank you to all of you who continue this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom, for this excursion down memory lane. This was really good. And now we jump to the present. Our next speaker is Bill Meyer. Since 2012, Bill is representing our program partner SPARK on our board of directors. Bill is the Senior Vice President Entrepreneurial Services here at SPARK. And he has founded and exited multiple startups in the technology and finance sectors. His areas of expertise are in finance, securities, and quantitative analysis. He has founded and worked with numerous businesses covering a broad range of industry sectors, ranging from startup ventures through Fortune 500 companies. And he will now take us, to the present, yes. And your slide is the next slide.
Okay, very good. I'm going to save that to the end. Wow, so I really joined the board in 2012? Okay, I distinctly remember Skip Sims taking a step backwards, pushing me forward. So it's been an honor. I've really enjoyed working with New Enterprise Forum. And so I guess I'll start by something very memorable to me. If any of you remember President Obama, he got in a lot of trouble because he made a bold statement, which is no one builds a company by themselves. Do you remember that? Oh boy, did he kick a bee's nest with that. Yeah, the whole thing, mom jeans, all that, whatever. But I remember thinking to myself, and this wasn't a phrase back then, but if I can paraphrase it today, tell me you've never started a business without telling me you've never started a business, right? Anyone who has ever walked the journey of trying to start a small business, a tech company, anything like that, knows you can never do it alone. It takes a team, it takes an ecosystem, it takes a whole support network to be successful. And so, much as Professor Porter was discussing, back in the early days, it was really hard. You just sort of, went, wow, this is hard, right? Yeah, this really is hard. What are you going to do? I don't know. Okay, get back to work. Let's figure it out. So it's very fulfilling to me to be able to have the role that I do, because if you look at the ecosystem today as compared to what it was back in the 90s, even the early 2000s, the IT Zone was an excellent organization, but pre that, you just you had to figure it out yourself. So now you fast forward to today, and the level of organization, coordination, cooperation that you see of the various ecosystem elements, NEF being a very important one. I mean, for some odd reason, public speaking doesn't really bother me, but that's not true for everyone. And so, it's a skill that needs to be developed and perfected. This is the place to do that. And if but for NEF, this wouldn't exist. And, Stefan might be going in front of an investor gold. Would you want to do your first pitch in front of a venture capitalist? Absolutely not. So, thank you to everyone in the audience. You're a helpful part of any entrepreneurship journey. So if I rewind, back to the early days of Spark, and I find it interesting. Spark was founded in 2006, so we're exactly half the age of New Enterprise Forum. That's excellent. And there were organizations that predated Spark, the IT Zone, the Washtenaw Development Council. So there were structural elements to it. But looking at how far it's come from the origin of Spark to where we are today, I mean, it's great. I think back. If we go through the chapters of what were technologies, remember when everybody was, we're Facebook for X? That was a thing. Someone mentioned blockchain. That was a thing. Mobility didn't exist, 10 years ago. Now it's a huge element of the Southeast Michigan ecosystem. And, AI, it was machine learning previously. Now it's consumer facing. Everybody understands it. But what I find really, well, most people use it, and most people use it responsibly sometimes. Um, but what's really exciting to me is we just don't know what's going to be next. What's it? Where are we going to be in 5 years? It's a very interesting time that we're in, specifically with AI causing a big disruption to how people work, how they live. Are they hiring students out of college, or are people still going to go to college? These are all open questions right now that we don't know how they're going to play out. And so one of the things that's very personally important to me, and I feel like it's very important to the ecosystem, is paying attention. What do our entrepreneurs need? How can we serve them? And staying nimble. So if something emerges that is a need for our ecosystem, can we build it and deploy it quickly? So, we are technically the stewards of taxpayer dollars, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. So we need to be the responsible, like that fiduciary element of public money, but we need to operate at the speed of startups because those are our clients. So it's very interesting and exciting to me to have the honor of having this role of leading what was originally, I was the only one seeing clients. Now I have a whole team. Lauren Towns Jr. is back there. He's at my side helping clients every day. We've got mobility specialists. We've got a whole team of people that can serve these companies at Spark, whether we're making non-dilutive grants that companies don't have to pay back to us, whether we're taking a serial entrepreneur, plugging them into a new company in an entrepreneur residence capacity, whether we're paying for half of some of their interns or all of their interns. We have the incubator here. We have our Entrepreneurs Bootcamp. All these programmatic offerings, not only do we offer them, but we're always critically analyzing, is this still the best thing we can be doing to serve these people, to serve these new entrepreneurs? And I also love pointing out, you did an excellent job of laying this out, Professor Porter, but it wasn't always cool to be an entrepreneur. You were actually pretty freaking weird to be an entrepreneur. Wait, you don't have a job? Okay, how do you live? How do you make money? I mean, my first company, I was at U of M. I had two value propositions. A, I need to pay my tuition and be able to eat. And two, the lofts that were built in U of M dorms were terrible, and I could do it better. So paid for college and provided a service to U of M students. So, it was very simple. It wasn't tech focused, but it was something that I could do to fill a need and take care of myself. But everyone thought I was crazy. And there was no such thing as entrepreneurship curriculum. Well, we talked about it, but now that we have the Center for Entrepreneurship, we have the Zellweger Institute, all those things, it makes me really happy that not only is entrepreneurship a legitimate career path, but you have the opportunity to try it out. It's hard. It's not for everyone, but it's amazing for some. And so if entrepreneurship is what you want to dedicate your life to or spend a chapter of your life doing or what have you, awesome. So I'm just happy we're a platform that can support entrepreneurs in their journey. Now, just to talk about Spark for a moment, we're a little complex. So if I can just walk you through exactly how we're structured, I have a reason, and I'll tell you why. It's an ulterior motive. So most people are familiar with Spark in that we support early stage technology, scalable startups. We've been doing that since the beginning. We have taxpayer dollars, as I mentioned, to do that work, which is amazing. You're not going to find that in other states. I was at an event earlier today, and there was a couple of 20, I don't know how old they were, but let's call them 20-year-olds, doing TikTok. So apparently I'll be on TikTok. I've never been on TikTok before. And they handed me a card, and they said, read it and tell me why it's wrong. So I opened it up and it said, Michigan is not a great place to start a company. And I'm like, oh yeah, again, you don't know anything about Michigan. The fact that we have these taxpayer dollars, because the state of Michigan identified early on that a very, very helpful strategy to have a prosperous economy here is to invest in early stage tech. If you look at the cost ultimately of creating a job by supporting tech entrepreneurs, I mean, it's, in a couple $1,000s versus if you want to attract a factory or you want to attract Google, or you remember Amazon HQ2? Yeah, that was interesting. That would have been 6 figures per job if you were going to actually attract that. So, it's a wise investment by the state of Michigan from people that are a lot smarter than I am, because they had this vision back in the 90s. So I'm able to continue that vision. And back then it was a pretty risky bet. Who's gonna, you're just gonna give money to entrepreneurs and not have them give back to you? That's crazy, right? Who's gonna do that? But fast forward 20 years, what do you know? It worked. We have a robust ecosystem. We have an amazing research university. We have an incredibly talented community of people. We have students that are starting companies and coming out of school and continuing those companies and all that. So it's actually working really, really well. And then within the last few years, we've been able to do something that I've always wanted to do, which is we've had these dollars exclusively to support early stage technology companies, but now we actually can support small businesses too, coffee shops, retail operations, things like that, consulting firms. That's called our Small Business Support Hub program through the state of Michigan. Uh, Fingers crossed, we have an RFP due on June 1st, which we are going over the budget this afternoon. So hopefully we get to continue that work, but that allows us to cover the full spectrum of, early stage technology and small businesses in general. We also have an element of Spark that does investments. A guy named Mike Flanagan and a woman named Lauren DeVry. They're excellent. Skip Sims ran the pre-seed fund back in the day. Skip's now retired. Mike and Lauren are taking it forward, and you've probably heard of the Michigan Innovate Capital Fund. I won't steal any thunder from you, Patty. You're part of that, but that is an element of what we do. We also curate an angel fund, which I think is amazing because we have successful angels, but we have a lot of angel curious people. And it's great that we have a structured fund that can bring them in and help them do due diligence, understand how to structure investments properly, avoid having a bad first experience as an angel investor. And that just creates a flywheel effect and brings more capital into the system. And then the other component, the last component that we do is traditional economic development. So, remember when Google came to Ann Arbor? Well, Spark was involved in creating the presentation, the package to attract them. KLA, Evoker Chemical, all these companies that choose Ann Arbor over any other location in the United States. And they do an analysis. They're site selectors. It's a whole industry. But we have a team that does that. And I tell you all of this because one of the things, it kind of drives me crazy, but I kind of get it. Spark is a complex organization. All of you in the audience now have an understanding of how we're structured. So here's my ask to you. As you're out in the community and you meet someone and they say, yeah, I'm working on this startup, or boy, I need to expand my office space, and can the state help with that? Or I'm trying to raise capital. Ask them if they know what Spark is. I guarantee you half the time they'll say, what's Spark? I mean, I was at the Michigan Tech Week earlier. I found 4 new clients, Ann Arbor startups that did not know about Spark. And it took me going to Detroit to find those startups. It's insane. But, people don't think there's just automatically help available to us. So there is help available. So if you're talking to someone who's an aspiring entrepreneur, wants to work for a tech company, is just entrepreneurial curious, ask them if they know what Spark is. If they don't, please let them know we're here. Please let them know we're here to help. And those referrals into our system are probably about 50% of the companies we actually work with on a yearly basis. So incredibly helpful. So I don't want to go on for too long, but it's been an honor working with New Enterprise Forum. Like I said, getting up here and talking publicly is extremely hard. Spark doesn't need to do this because we have an excellent organization that knows exactly what they're doing and does a great job of it. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for all the events you'll attend in the future. And yes, that would that would be your call. Sure. Can we wait till the end?
Exactly. We're still in the middle of the program.
Okay. Great. All right. And so the last thing that I want to close with is something that we haven't done before. So is Luke Donahue in the audience? Okay, he's not here. Well, he was helpful in this. We wanted to know, okay, we've got 40 years of New Enterprise Forum. What's the impact? Do we have metrics? Can we measure what has been done? So let me unveil 40 years of NEF coaching. Well, drum roll if you can imagine. Oh, but the little bar is blocking it. So the companies that NEF has coached. Let's see here. Yeah, but I'm going to mess it up. Let me see if I can move it. There we go. And let me move the box. Hey, I'll move the box too. Here, we'll go over here. All right. So since inception, NEF coach companies have raised $1.5 billion. Now, exactly. That's a unicorn and a half. So we always look, we really notice things like Duo Security, Llamasoft, the big exits. Our latest is a company called Histosonics that just exited for over $2 billion. Those are amazing, but it's not all about the home run grand slams, right? Lots of singles, lots of doubles. That makes an excellent ecosystem. So the capital that's been raised successfully has created jobs, has created new entrepreneurs. It's this flywheel effect we have from the ecosystem. So we should all be really proud of that. Oops.
We have to click on it again because you clicked on the Zoom stuff. You have to use the mouse.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Thank you. Hold on. All right. There we go. Now, the companies that NEF has coached have more than 2,600 employees. So that is a driver of economic, success. To me, everyone wants to talk about jobs when it comes to economic development, but it's problematic talking about jobs because startups tend to be a little late in the job creation compared to larger companies. So after 40 years, that's really impressive. And watch, all the companies we're talking to now, like, for example, to pick on Stefan again, you haven't hired a lot of people yet, but if you're successful in your mission, I can see, a staff of hundreds, something like that. I was just talking to Mike Klein, a guy, a CEO of a company called Genomenon. They're up to 130 people. You look at a company like SkySpecs, which was some U of M students that went through our entrepreneur boot camp and stumbled on wind turbines. They're up, to almost 300 people. There's real economic impact in supporting these early stage companies. And then lastly, 34 of these companies have had exits either by merger or acquisition. So congratulations to everyone that's been part of this success. So thank you all.
Thank you, Bill. And isn't this great to see these numbers for the more than 400 companies that we've coached in the 40 years of our existence? So I'm very glad that Luke and Bill and Hayden could find the data. So let me, okay. Yes, so next speaker, Anna, that's you. Let me read this up. Anna is the founder and CEO of MinaRosa Technologies, and she's a recent graduate from our coaching program. With background in aerospace engineering from the University of Michigan and experience at SpaceX and early stage hardware startups, Anna brings deep expertise in electrical mechanical systems design, first principles thinking, and technical leadership. Many of us have heard Anna say that she wanted to be the first woman on Mars. But we also know that instead, she took her own experience with recurrent UTIs and early self-experimentation with light therapy, and founded a women's health startup developing the Wonder Woman Belt portable light therapy device, a non-invasive approach to pelvic and bladder pain relief. Anna moved back to Detroit last year to build the company full-time, and MinaRosa is now preparing for its pre-sale launch while building a brand rooted in trust, advocacy, and thoughtful design for women's health. I'm very happy to have Anna here tonight, and we've asked her to talk about her experience and why she thinks that we still have relevance.
Thank you, Vivka. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I think several of you guys have been pretty up to date with my story. You guys hear me. I've talked a lot about how I wanted to be the first woman on Mars, and then I started building my company. But I want to talk a little bit about the impact that NEF has had on me and the relevancy that I truly do see, because I tell every founder I come across, have you guys heard about NEF? Have you applied to NEF? And I did that about 5 times just this morning at Michigan Tech Week in Detroit. So, so one of the things I want to start off by explaining is even though I started exploring entrepreneurship at the University of Michigan through the Center for Entrepreneurship and through Zellori, I still did not really understand what it meant to pitch and to talk to investors. And I think it's because it's one of those things that you can read and you can take classes and you can listen to podcasts, but just like building a company, you don't know what you're doing until you actually do it. You learn by doing, you learn by failing and figuring it out. When I first moved back to Detroit, I share people a story about how Greg got me to NEF is because I think it was the second week I was in Detroit after I came back from LA, and I had the opportunity to pitch at A2 New Tech. And after my presentation, Greg very politely basically told me it was very bad, but not in those words. He was like, "Hey, have you heard about NEF?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." He explains to you what NEF does. He's like, "Would you be interested in learning how to pitch and getting some feedback?" And I was like, "Yes." I knew I needed a little bit of help. And that's when I started talking to NEF and exploring and seeing everything that they could do and help me with. And, I went through the program and it was really fantastic. But what a lot of people don't know is just how impactful it was. When I had just started the coaching, I did my first ever pitch to a VC at the beginning of the summer last year. And it was to Daniel Jeffries at Kalamazoo Forward Ventures. And you guys can ask him about this. And so I'd reached out to him, and it was the very first person I had reached out to. I didn't even know what I was doing. I just wanted to try. And he was prominent, and some people had told me to talk to him. So I got a meeting with him, and I got on the call, and I gave my attempted pitch at MinaRosa. And at the end of it, I was like, "Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you speaking with me." And then he goes, "Aren't you going to ask me for money?" And I was like, well, I figured you would tell me if you wanted to give me money." So, and then he was like, "Can I give you some advice? Are you open to hearing some advice?" And I was like, "Yes, please." I told him, I was like, I knew at that point I was a month out of an amicable separation with my previous co-founder. So I knew I needed some help and advice. And I like to learn from people's experiences. So I was like, please tell me. He was like, "Anna, you need to ask for money." You don't pitch to an investor and not ask for money. It's like, especially being a woman when you're a minority, is like you cannot afford the opportunity to miss asking for money. If you believe in what you are building, then you have to make sure that that gets across to the person who's sitting across from you who can partner with you to make that happen. And then I went through the program with NEF, and I realized, and the reason I did NEF was because I knew I had issues and I needed to get better. But then I came through NEF and I came on the other side, and I felt super confident, and I finally understood how to tell my story, because again, I'm an aerospace engineer. I love talking, I love writing, but I also love to talk about the data a lot, and I like to get sidetracked, and I like to go a million different places, because that's just how my brain works. That's why I like reading research papers for fun. And so I came out the other side, and it was absolutely incredible. And so, like, present day, I've been telling a lot of people and a lot of founders, a lot of people from outside of Michigan about what an incredible place this is and how much I've learned through NEF. And something I just realized earlier today, actually, is I've been saying for the last 6 months, whenever I talk to people in Michigan, outside of Michigan, about my fundraising journey and progress, that I'm very, very lucky. I'm very, very grateful. And when I compare myself to a lot of the startups, specifically at New Lab in Detroit, I'm one of the very few that in a short period of time has raised the money that I've been intending to raise. And that's been incredible. And I kept telling everybody I'm very lucky. But it hit me earlier today when I was explaining to another new founder about NEF that it wasn't luck. A large part of it was more than I thought was NEF, because NEF explains to you what investors are expecting. Everybody who's on your coaching team has not only built businesses before, they've also invested. So they know both sides of the coin. There's something interesting. I've talked to a lot of people and a lot of amazing, incredible people who try to help startups, but who don't have that experience, who either or only have one side of the experience. And there's something so unique and special about NEF that they understand both sides, and they will tell you. When I was in SF last year and in Seattle and LA for all the tech weeks, and I was trying to figure out if I wanted to stay in Detroit or move to another place to raise money, there was something about Michigan that at the time I couldn't verbalize, or I could only verbalize a little bit, and I've gotten so much better over the last 6 months as I've been able to put the pieces together. But I knew there was something really special about the community in Michigan. And one of the things that I met an investor from Chicago yesterday at Michigan Tech Week, and I was sharing him the story that the thing about Michigan, that it starts to kind of like exemplify a little bit what's so special here, is if you are on the West Coast, in LA, for example, and your car breaks down, you'll have people be like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad, I'm so sorry, good luck with that, and then walk away. And then when you're in Michigan and in the Midwest, your car breaks down, you have a flat tire, why would you did you not understand? Let me sit down and help you. But don't do that again. Be careful. Watch out for this in the future. But they sit down and they help you. And that is something uniquely powerful about Michigan, but even more so about NEF. I believe that NEF is going to continue to stay around and does stay around, not only because of the coaching experience and where they come from and how they help startups, but the values that every single one of you here exemplifies. In my company, I have a saying whenever I bring a new employee on, I want to do good work with good people following good values. And I have to say, every single person I've met at NEF since I first heard about NEF last year has lived and exemplified that. And it's one of the reasons I love this space and I love the people here. So I just wanted to say, like, if you guys, I mean, you all know how incredibly powerful you are, but there is so much work to be done, and you guys are willing to do it. You're doing it for free. You are here and you've been here because you've changed with the times, as people have mentioned. You've helped startups. You believe and see in their success, and you tell them and help them how to get better. You don't just try to be nice. You don't shy away from telling the truth. You know, you'll look at my financials and you'll be like, Anna, this doesn't make any sense. What are you talking about? And then you'll help me sit down. Thank you so much, Bill. You'll help me sit down over multiple weeks to figure it out. So I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I continue to tell people about NEF. I think when we talk about the future of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Michigan, in Detroit, in Ann Arbor, if they were to follow the example set by NEF, then without a doubt, we are going to become not like SF, not like New York, not like LA. We're going to become our own inspirational hub, where it's about the values and the community and believing in each other that actually helps prop us up. So I hope more people in Michigan follow the path that NEF has set. And I want to say congratulations on 40 years, because you guys are absolutely incredible.
That was very nicely said, Anna. So, and now we are approaching our last speaker. Patty, I'm sorry that you had to wait so long. Patty Glaza is the Executive Vice President, Venture at Invest Detroit, and Managing Director, ID Ventures. And I believe that most of you know that ID Ventures is providing early stage investment to Michigan-based high-tech startups. They have invested in over 200 companies through multiple funds, and they've also invested in several NEF graduates. ID Ventures has for many years been one of our strongest supporters and partners, and Patty has been a member of our board of directors from 2016 through 2019. In 2022, we have recognized Patty's many contributions to the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Michigan by presenting her with our first ever Startup Community Champion Award. And we are very, very pleased today to have her back to share her perspective on the state of entrepreneurship in Michigan and on NEF's role in the startup ecosystem. Stage is yours, Patty.
All right, those were three incredibly difficult presentations or speakers to follow. Anna, just incredible job. And I think that really amplifies the journey that entrepreneurs have at NEF. You know, I was thinking back about, you know, kind of going back to what Bill was saying. You know, it's very easy to fail alone, but in order to succeed, you need others. And the others are sitting in this room, right? Without you and the community that sits around the founders, it's very hard to progress. It's hard to learn what you need to do next. Hard to have that capability to get up here and just talk to a crowd, right? Because being able to engage, being able to share your story, being able to capture an investor is so critical. And NEF does really have a really strong personal connection to me. When I came back into the ecosystem about 15 years ago as an investor, I was looking around like, where are the founders? Where are they going? Where are they presenting? And honestly, NEF was one of those few places that I could go and hear pitches from founders. And the thing is, I knew I was going to hear and see great pitches because the coaching job here, they were preparing them, they're giving them great advice, and they welcomed me into their fold. So I know Lee was here and Mark, everyone from the older days. Like it was just a unique community to be uplifted and feeling a part of something bigger than what you are. And NEF has delivered this for the last 40 years. Right? And as we look forward and we think about all the changes, so I've lived through .com and nanotech and clean tech and you name the tech that waves that we've had. We really are in, I hate to use the word unprecedented because that's a little overused, but things are changing so rapidly, right? Even as investors, we're all trying to figure it out, right? You know, is it deep tech now? Is it deep tech plus AI? You know, we don't just want a wrapper now, you know, so trying to figure out the investing landscape has been crazy. But the one thing that we know, right? So yes, you can use Claude to have a pretty pitch deck. You can use ChatGPT to have maybe refine your business model. But AI does not give you the relentless direct feedback. It can't uplift you when you're feeling down and tired and exhausted. It can't give you that advice when you're just like, hey, what have you experienced this before? What did you do? Right? And so what we really need to focus on right now, because again, I think AI gives us even more reason to sit in a back room and code by ourselves and try to develop that $400 million company on our own, but don't do it alone, right? And make sure that the people you're talking to, you're here, right? You're part of the community, you're part of the others. But you need to make sure that folks are coming to organizations like this, getting the support they need, building the friendships, the peer groups. And so make sure we're really encouraging folks to do that. You know, I think about you know, some of the questions or journeys of founders, right? Like, oh, I'm going to be out of money in, you know, 2 months, right? How do I hire the right salesperson? I have 2 babies under 2. Should I be really running a startup right now? You know, these are real questions. That was me back 20 some years ago as a founder. I didn't know NEF existed, and I wish I had. And these are questions I can't go to ChatGPT for, right? We need people who have been through these experiences and that can share their journeys to help us move forward. So I know this is short, but I don't want to stand between folks and the dessert and the champagne. But I do want to say that community, right? NEF has played such a critical role for 40 years. And that's not something light. And the organization has evolved. And to see everybody in this room after this amount of time, and the no, and people who were here 20 years ago, 15 years ago, but also new faces, right? People are coming into the fold and energizing the group. It's just incredible to see. So I hope folks invest in this organization, continue to be mentoring, continue to be involved, because that's what it will take to keep Michigan at the forefront of the great progress we've had. You know, I was here 20 years ago with my startups. I don't know, Tom, there were 4 venture funds maybe in the state? About 20 years ago?
Oh, 20 years, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and a couple branch offices of some that were out of state.
Fair. So, and now we've got well over 35, 40 plus outside outside investors and hundreds of startups across the state. But there is only one NEF, right? And I think you should all feel proud to be a part of it. And I just want to thank everyone for coming out today and supporting the 40th anniversary, because it is such an accomplishment. Thank you to everyone who started it. What an incredible organization to be a part of. So thank you for letting me be here today and be a part of the celebration. And I'll turn it back over, but I'm excited for dessert and champagne.
I hear you. I hear you.